Korea is a brutal regime, but they have been sustained to a large extent based on the direct investment of China and Russia.
Well, and
And
Sweden and Switzerland and many European countries that do business with North Korea.
with North Korea, oh, I did not even know that. Oh, well, okay then.
As an embassy in Pyongyang. I mean, I think we should open up an embassy there.
Well, I mean, what good would it do to have a U.S. embassy in North Korea?
We have a better sense of what's going on. We can cultivate contacts. We can start to better understand what's the problems are in their economy. And so rather than just have a stick, you have a carrot and a stick. Remember, that was Trump's approach, right? He wanted a beautiful future for North Korea, saying, hey, we're not trying to upend you. We want your people to have a better future. And we can all stop threatening each other. But you've got to stop doing certain things in order to gain these rewards.
I mean, a lot of people criticize Trump as, this guy who loves dictators because he met with Kim Jong-un. You're saying that there's a different strategic reason behind it than just him loving dictators?
I have this conversation a lot about Trump's Russia policy and his China policy. And what I always say is, you got to look at what we did. And I know this is a podcast about China, so I'll be brief, but, we killed 300 Russians on the banks of the Euphrates River. Nobody talks about that. We sanctioned Putin's inner circle. We unleashed energy. We kicked his spies out in tandem with our allies. We withdrew from the INF Treaty. We were very tough on Russia, probably the toughest on Putin of any president since the fall of the Soviet Union. And on North Korea, same. And on China, I mean, we did more for human rights in China than any other president. And we were very tough on them, and we didn't have random dialogues. We came to the table to get fair and reciprocal treatment. And then to start stopping them from doing malign things where we could. But again, I want to focus on China because it's the China Uncensored podcast. I think one of the mistakes that we make is we think of the U.S.-China relationship as the only thing, and it's not. It's not how the world works. China is building alliances with Russia, Iran, North Korea, Pakistan, countries in the middle like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, countries in our hemisphere, Cuba, Colombia, Brazil. This is a multifaceted threat, and the United Front operations, just again, to go back to the subject, a lot of the point of them is to prevent us from seeing that or thinking that it's adversarial to our interests or to stop us from taking action, as we saw at the recent New York mayor case, right, where you had a top aide who was placed in not the mayor, two governors' offices. It's a different sort of threat than the Soviet Union was. We've got to recognize that, and we've got to talk about it. We've got to do so in a fact-based, calm, data-driven way. This is a serious threat.
Yeah, I think one of the big things I've gotten from this interview is that, it's easy to focus on, largest standing army in the world, biggest navy in the world, but really the biggest weapon is education. How the United Front is teaching Americans to think a certain way. And one thing you have brought up consistently through this podcast is the need for us to educate Americans about the truth. Like when you were talking about people in the State Department at the Taiwan desk, part of me is like, just fire them all, get them out. But you made the point of like, no, talk to these people, and a lot of them can actually see what's going on. And I think that is such a key approach, rather than like this, this kind of carrot and stick. You don't always need a stick. If we can actually educate these people in government that, our fellow Americans are not our enemies. It's China, the Chinese Communist Party, that is our enemies. And we just need to get this information out there. That's what's key. Education is key.
Well, and the media plays a big role in that, right? I don't see a lot of deep investigative reporting from, for instance, the really, big scale media organizations. Like, Bloomberg, for instance, had a reporter that was doing remarkable work on Xi Jinping's, stolen wealth and his family and the deep corruption of the Xi family. And Bloomberg stopped it, right? He wanted to sell terminals in China. The New York Times has some fabulous reporters, one of whom used to be my intern, Paul Mosier, who's in Taiwan now, who does an amazing job talking about kind of the surveillance state in China. He does great work. But we just need so much more. Kate O'Keefe, who's now at Bloomberg, I don't know how long she'll be able to do this kind of stuff, but she's done some incredible work. There are people out there, Jimmy Quinn at National Review, Phil Lankowski, um, in a Washington publication, Bill Gertz, Washington Times. There are a lot of people out there, but you really need the big publications that have a greater reach to do more. And again, I just want to go back. You need to educate corporate America in the investment class. I mean, there's a real disconnect there, and it's not like they don't want to learn. It's just that it hasn't been part of their focus. And if you're running a big company, you're a super busy person. You're responsible for like tens of thousands of employees. It's a big job. And so it's hard to get people to focus on this, but we have to, because my fear is that we just don't have a lot of time. It took us decades to figure out what to do to confront the Soviet Union and eventually topple it. And we had big debates about that, right? We had Détente, then we had Reagan. I mean, these are really different approaches, and that's how we worked through the process, through our democracy. But I worry that we don't have that kind of time.
That's not the optimistic ending I wanted for the podcast.
Sorry.
So what is the most important thing we can do in a limited time frame to make a positive difference?
There we go.
I would say, gosh, that's tough. I would say keep doing podcasts like this. Get a bigger audience. Get a wide variety of people on your show. Don't just talk to folks who agree with you. I think that's always a tendency. I used to be a member of the press corps. It's easier, right? Get out there and have a spirited debate. That's one of the strengths of our democracy, is that we can do that, right? We can say what we want, and we don't have some government minder there saying, if you say that, I'm going to put your mom in jail, right? It doesn't happen here. So, use the tools that you have at your disposal to educate people. I think it's that has to be the first step.
What about our audience? Is there some advice you'd give them?
Well, we've mentioned several things on the podcast. I mean, if they're listening to you guys, they're already switched on. So in some respects, we're preaching to the choir here. But I would say educate yourself further. Talk to your local chamber of commerce. Talk to your state rep. If you've got a Chinese friendship organization in your town, show up at their meeting and ask them, can you go back to China? Right? Do you ever talk about Tiananmen Square? Why not? Use the tools that we have to confront them. If you have, for instance, a Confucius Institute, it's called something different in your high school, because that happens here too. It's not just in college campuses. Go to your principal and say, hey, this isn't what you think it is. And by the way, we don't need to import mainlanders into the United States. We have plenty of Chinese Americans or just other random Americans who speak perfect Mandarin. And vote on these things. When you're going to the ballot box for your state rep or your U.S. senator or for president, everybody votes on different things. But maybe this should be one of those things that you keep an eye on and vote accordingly.